Well, I am the same because there is no same. So it is not if you change a heart, a liver, an arm, a leg. But the brain is still a problem. No, but it is very serious, you know, for many doctors and especially among transplant doctors. The question of brain is absolutely fascinating, and I think this is the one who make the the surgeon who made my transplantation. I'm not sure it was him or another one. Told me, you know, the dream of every transplant doctor is to transplant a brain. Well, bonne chance. So I'm sorry for my very awful English, but the students are already forced to support it, so why not you all? Well, there is no title on the advertising, not advertising, but how the schedule of the EGS for this conference. I don't know why, but Chris didn't want to give a title, but I don't know if I give it to you. No, I have no title. No, but I thought the best could be for me this evening to talk about politics, because I'm sure that everybody has at least some little interest in what is called politics. And so because it's something about which I have already many times worked. Okay, I will not be too long, I hope, and I would prefer if we could discuss more times than I will talk. Well, politics, you know, is today a word almost void of signification. Politics has, of course, has a small signification when you think about, to make a manifestation or protest somewhere in France, in Greece. Politics has a small signification when it goes on the encounter between Hollande and Merkel and Obama, and etc. But we all know that all what happens in this sphere has not very much signification in the other meaning of the word, or importance, because the real power is not there. Is not there, meaning is not with the people of the government and with the people, the absolute people, we. Neither the government nor the people has power, or a very, very so thin and so weak power. Maybe it is not absolutely new, of course. But what is new is that, as it is said since already a long time, that the king is naked. The king or the queen. And the queen. That is, it is clear that a real power did go, as Foucault, in a very clever way, understood it. The power is gone from the so-called power to the knowledge, maybe to the so-called knowledge, but it is not so-called because it is a real knowledge. It may be called as scientific or as aware, or as techno-scientific, which is more more accurate. No? So real power is somewhere else in the big machinery, the techno-economical machinery, which is governing, in fact, our world, and by which, by the effect and the power of which our world is transforming itself in a very enormous way, in a way that I think we should understand that we are only at the beginning of this process. Only at the beginning. And the beginning means, in terms of change of society and change of civilization even, means many centuries. You know. Already in the 40s, when Heidegger was writing his black notebooks, where there is something not to speak about now, but which is terrible and awful, you know. But nevertheless, Heidegger did have a sense of what was going on at this time. He was not alone. People quite different from him, like, for example, Henry Miller, he made very similar remark at this time. So Heidegger writes, something is going on that will take 3 or 4 centuries to come to a new time. So it makes that sure. It makes for us a very, very difficult and very new for us, new old child of a history of prevision, prediction, and programmation, etc. We are in a way we are out of order, I would say. Or the program, our general program is out of order. And inside this program, many things are no longer functioning in the same way. And even precisely technical things or scientific things. But at the center is politics. It is because one thing did already go away a certain time before, and the thing did have the name of God. So God is no longer here, at least in what is called the Western world, but precisely one question of our situation is the question if it is still, if it makes still sense to speak of the Western world, because the Western the Western world is the world of science, technology, democracy, right, etc., which is covering all the world in the process named globalization, despite the fact that there are, as we naturally very well know, there are strong resistance to this global domination, but the resistance, to say the Islamic resistance or the Chinese, the Russian resistance, are all already taken in the process. Therefore, of course, there are resistance, there are fight and within the global sphere. So, in the middle of all this transformation, which is more than a transformation, I prefer to use the word mutation, and I would say in a strong biological meaning. Mutation, that occurs when in a chromosome a unity named gene, I don't know in English, for example, return itself or change the position in the chain in the genetic chain. So this is a mutation in this meaning. Some pieces of our chromosome are changing of place, of size, of organizations. So in the middle, politics, because politics appears, despite all what I say now, politics appears as the name of the place by which it should be possible to decide something else, to decide that we do not want to go in this direction and we decide to go in the other direction. But precisely not only the power of decision seems to be very, very weak, but which is much more the possibility of decision. What do we want to decide about energy? Do we want to decide no longer energy? Of course not. What means then to decide about energy? To make all the possible to develop new technology and non-usable energy, as it was and is still the case with coal and petrol. But precisely, as you know, the new and non-usable energies are until now not ready to function. Or much more complicated, what do we want with human life? Not to speak about animal life, which is as well a problem. But what do we want? Do we want to live until what? The last sentence I heard is 400 years. That it is supposed. It is a kind of goal, of horizon for people, of the Silicon Valley and some other places. 400 years. Okay, but nobody asks the question, what is at stake with a life of 400 years? No? And how you manage with several generations? So, enough to evoke that. But we are very far from that. But we are already for the developed countries, we are already in a situation where we are full of specialized houses, half hospital, half houses for very old persons and very weak and damaged persons, full of people with Alzheimer or with other kind of disease. And is that the life we want to keep? But we keep it. And because Chris mentioned my heart transplantation, since the time I live with an other heart, a new, I am still in the awareness that comes to me when I realized at the beginning that for the doctor the only goal is to make somebody live more time, which at first glance is excellent. But why it is excellent? And I know, everybody tell me when I say that, but you have lived 25 years more, Jean-Luc. Wow, is not terrific. Terrific in what sense? I don't know. No? Yes. Of course, it is better for the people close to you, but what's more? No much more. Not to me. It's not better to me, because if I would have died at 51, I would be dead. So I can have a regret not having lived 20. It's very. No, it is as simple as that. We live all the time longer, and we don't know why. And in a way, we could say that we have the feeling that people 2 or 3 centuries before, they lived more or less the half of the length of our lives, but in a way they did know why they lived and died. Of course, to say that is certainly partly or totally false, and in no way nostalgia was ever an answer and even less a solution to anything. But the question of nostalgia is very important, because it is very difficult not to be nostalgic today. Absolutely not nostalgic. Not to, for example, you can read today, every day in journal, etc., and on the TV, expression like the new capitalism, the late capitalism, the financial capitalism, etc., of course, is very bad. And that is said as if the capitalism of 50 years ago was a little better, or a little less worse, and not to speak about the capitalism of 5 centuries ago. But I'm sorry, capitalism was a capitalism from the starting point, and the globalization started with capitalism itself. You have only to read, for example, Fernand Braudel about the capitalism. So, what is true is that we are a very strange society and culture which continuously criticize or even hate its own production and its own way to function. We hate capitalism. You don't need to be a communist to take capitalism as the enemy. Or we are all communists. And in a certain way, I think, yes, communism has been the name of the resistance, maybe without any clear idea of what was to do, but has been the name of the resistance to something that everybody was feeling and conceiving as dangerous. But at the same time, capitalism has been the great story of our civilization. Think about all the conquest of America, the ship going to Asia, and all the colonization. And the colonization, what's a colonization? It is very difficult to answer to that. It is not only the domination of the very bad colonizer on other poor people, but it is the process of an expansion of technology. What happens with Christophe Colomb? It happens that a lot of technology put together, mixed with theology about the idea of the kingdom of the Prince John, mixed actually with a lot of story and feeling, etc., about China, gold, etc., etc., and the history of Marco Polo. Don't forget that Christophe Colomb did have the book of Marco Polo on his boat, going to come America. That is an enormous movement. And of course, there is a lot of criticism to make about the way we did colonize the 3/4 of the world. But the impulse was the impulse of the whole civilization. Okay. Then again, we are in the global development of this strange story. This is a really strange story. This is the first time in the whole story of mankind and of Earth and of universe that something happened. That one civilization born with, as you know, born between Socrates, Moses, Christ, Roman law, become the civilization for the world. So, maybe this process is coming to an end, or either to an end, or to a new mutation, which is not an end, but maybe the beginning of something else. I know some people who are able to say maybe capitalism is only at the end of his childhood. Maybe it is. No, it is. The friend who told that to me is Balibar, so it is not nobody. No, it is somebody who knows what he says. Maybe, but we are in the transition, and there again, politics. Why? Because in the middle of the transition, I would say in the middle of the sea or of the river, we are neither like the Hebrew without sea, nor like the Egyptian under the sea. But we are half in the water. We try to breathe out of the water, and we think, how could we grasp what is at stake and orient. So this orient, which has been for such a long time the place of the direction, place toward which to go. Kant wrote an essay with a title, how take an orientation. I don't know how it is translated in English. How take an orientation in thinking, which is a symptom that already Kant felt, a lack of orientation, which, for example, was absolutely not the case of Descartes. For Descartes, orientation is very simple. If I am in a forest in the night and I have nothing to orient me, no sun, and the forest is very dark and then no stars, so the only mean is to go straight away. Admirable Descartes. How can you go straight away in the forest? There are trees that you have to. Well, okay. No, but it is very significant of the position of Descartes, which is not the position of one man, which is the position of the whole culture. And today we feel that politics is or should be, better is the name of the place of orientation, and after orientation of the possibility of decision. I already said what is to say about decision. That is a matter of power to decide, but orientation precisely every day, but maybe less in the last time, but for a long time, every day we heard this is political, and the political has to take the thing and to decide and to orient us. But the name of the possible politics, the name again, like communism, socialism, radical socialism, or even what is called center in politics in Europe, that is humanism, or something like that. No. That's the reason for what politics from extreme right can come and demand to take the power because they have orientation. There is a question of what is called populism today, or extreme right, as well as some part of extreme left. They have orientation because they take the orientation from some past. but precisely the past is the past. And Marx, as you know, was the one saying that in the history things happen only once, and the second it is the once, and the first is a tragedy and the second a comedy. He says that about the how you say, un coup d'état. Coup d'état. Taking the power by the second Napoleon, the second which was the third. And so on. So no, things don't come again. And then, what is possible as politics, or not only as politics, not only as a definition of a political orientation, but what is really at the place of politics, or in the place of one. Even if you speak in the most democratic way, that is the supposed to be direct democracy, without all the stuff of the representation, I mean in the political sense, the deputation, which is, of course, is full of a lot of problems. If you take the direct democracy, okay, we have two recent examples which are very, very instructive. That is two referendums in Great Britain and in France. Well, this one of Great Britain is much more big and important, but we have two very recent cases of referendum where there is a referendum. First, the way of referendum is not exactly the way of direct democracy, but direct democracy in the true sense can only be a democracy of council, that is of Soviet, and of a relative small council able to make a decision in common. But Rousseau did already know that a republic shall not be too big, because beside a certain number of people, it is no longer possible to manage a city together. But we are very far from Rousseau. And we are far from Rousseau because the history has been what it has been, and because the great number, which today are the rule, we are on all aspects of that, we are in the grid, in the enormous number. First, the number of people on the earth, and then all the number of money that is necessary to do, I don't know, things like to go to the comet, to the planet, etc., or all the means, the technical means possible to, I don't know, to make something like a net. The net. What was the first name of the net? The internet. That is the universal connection. That all goes on enormous number. And enormous number means something else than a difference in quantity. It means, I would say, to make the philosopher, an ontological difference. It is not the same to have 9 million of people and to have 3 million, maybe. Well, then politics is not only empty of the power of decision, but empty of the possibility to reorient itself. So this is the reason I would say, for what I feel, not all the time, but frequently uneasy in France, at least, when I see all the criticism of the political people, etc. Because, I don't have any personal affection nor personal links to François Hollande. And I think it is, I don't know who is him and what he wanted. Certainly it is a man with a will of power, as every politician man, because you cannot make politics if you don't have this will. But anyway, Hollande makes what he can, the poor man. Maybe you are scandalized, but you can. I don't know. Maybe somebody else could work better. Of course, Angela Merkel is much better. But Germany is not in the same economical and social and cultural state as France. And on the other side, David Cameron is much better, or looks much better, with more decision, more. But David Cameron decide this terrible referendum, and then I come back to the referendum. Is it not very impressive? For me, it's incredibly impressive how you make a referendum which the very day of the issue of referendum return itself almost. You have already 2 million of Britain citizens asking for annulation of the referendum. And in France, the small referendum about the airport called Notre-Dame-des-Landes, this very strange thing of a referendum which is even not absolutely legal, I don't know. So this referendum takes place. The answer is yes to the airport, which is an answer which was not needed because the justice did already decide that it has to be done. And at the very moment of the end of the referendum, the enemy, because it is the contrary of Britain, but so the enemy of the referendum, who as a citizen of France should agree, yes, the referendum said, well, okay, we leave. No, they said, no, this referendum is false, it makes nothing, and we stand. And maybe it will be very terrible between government and those people in the coming weeks. Don't know. Well, what does that mean? That means that people cannot neither decide nor orient. People, and the more the people is made from many people, the more the decisions are of the level of the opinion, of the it seems to me, or I prefer that. And of course, all the English citizens who would leave to the referendum suffer and sometimes suffer a lot from the development of the capitalism of the city of London and of the link to Europe, which is appreciated as a cause of the poverty, etc., in some place, old industry places in between, etc. Then there is no place for politics, neither in the government nor in the people. And we still use the word politics to name a place which should be the place of orientation and decision, but which is empty. And then the worst is that the word politics becomes sometimes quasi equal to theology, or not to theology, to not to paradise, not to salvation, but salvation. So it is a place to salvation. So the place to salvation, as far as we know, is a place of God. Better of Christ, it's a little better. Not the abstract God, but Christ. Okay. And then the confusion is absolutely complete with politics. At the same time, we take just a short time to remember from where politics comes. You know that politics is made with the Greek word polis, and polis designates the city, what we translate, or what the Latin start to translate with civitas, map. I start to speak Italian because I'm thinking of civitas of Rome, etc. No, but the Greek polis, first, from which we kept the name and the word still, despite the Latin civitas, etc. Of course, citizen and city are important words for us, but politics is a main word. In a way, is more than a word. It is a kind of appeal, or what the German name a parole. It is, well, I don't know to say it in English. Okay. What has been the Greek polis? You remember that a few years ago, at the beginning and after the beginning of the story of Greece, it has been written a lot of time that it is incredible that Europe is so aggressive and ugly to Greece, which is the place of birth of our democracy. This is very, very nice as a metaphor and an image, but in a way it is absolutely wrong, because the Greek democracy, the democracy of the polis, was made first, precisely after or at the end of a moment of total disorientation of the whole East Mediterranean. A lot of empire or a lot of organizations like the Mycenaean one, the palatial organization, was destroyed. A destruction which is still today very, very difficult to explain. But we know a little about that, and it seems to be clear that the destruction was linked to the enormous change, the change from the bronze to iron, the change to the alphabetic writing, and a change in the way of making commerce. What's commerce?
Commerce.
Commerce. Not only inside Mediterranean, but even outside. So, and after a long period, once again, it takes centuries, almost from the 12th century before to the 7th before, and or 8, yes. The minimum is 4 centuries, to produce something which at the same time was the police and the philosophy, or not with the name philosophy, but with the name of physics. That is the interest for the nature as such. That is very simple, and it has a similarity with our situation in a certain way. The end of the gods and of the whole extremely hierarchic society. Hierarchic meaning, don't forget, hieros meaning sacred. That is sacred command, hierarchy. And then, slowly, something was invented, the police. And the police was the place where the people would give to themselves their own law. Autonomia, and then isonomia, that is law equal for everybody. Wonderful. But the police was the place of autonomia and isonomia for the citizen. And the citizen was people having some families of line of family behind them, that is belonging to the lineage. I don't know how to, but you understand. So in family, and having a certain richness, even if not very enormous, but first. But second, those citizens was only free men, or it should be said in the opposite way. To be a citizen makes from you a free man. And a free man is a male, not a woman, not a slave, and not a foreigner. That is exactly the contrary of the modern democracy. And why the contrary? Why? Because with Rome, the things change in a very right way. That is that the world of Mediterranean enter a very different way, which was, I would say, the way of, for the first time maybe in the entire world, the way of something different of the way of a land, a country with its own law, gods, etc., and kings, but the way of a world. The Mediterranean started to be a world. It started to be a globalization at the time of Rome, because the peculiarity of Rome has been to dominate a lot of countries and people, as you know, from Syria to Scotland. And letting every people and kings, etc., having their own organization, but at the top was the Roman white, and the fact that you could be a Roman citizen in Syria or in Scotland. And we all know the story of Paul, almost the founding father of Christianity. Paul was a Roman citizen, and when he was arrested, he said, I am a Roman citizen. I have the right to be judged in Rome and not in Jerusalem. And he was taken to Rome. So Rome with the right, the law, which is, I would like to say, it is something like a technique, a technology, if you prefer. The law, the Roman law, is a technology that is something which is able to produce effect, organization, etc., and which does not claim to be of any other origin than itself. Of course, it was already prepared in the Greek law, but the Roman law produced an entire body of law, still in evolution, etc., which goes with another technology or many other technology, military technology, urban technology, which, as you know, has been very developed in Rome, etc., etc. Rome is a starting point of, I would say, domination of technology. And in a way, we could say that Rome is a breaking point about politics, because on one side, Rome has been the only civil religion existing until now. Maybe apart in a certain extent, but to our extent, the actual civil religion of the United States of America, which in a certain way is a civil religion. But in Rome, in the Republican Rome, it has been really a civic religion. That is, Rome was the object, the sacred object of the religion itself. You know, in Rome it was a lot of gods, but the politic organization of Rome was made with a lot of people, but among them priests. And the highest priest of Rome was the one who each year made public for the coming year, the way the law will be interpreted for 1 year. No. And the end of Rome is the end of the civil religion, and the end of something which maybe happens only once. Later, as you know, civil religion was a kind of haunting for the modern consciousness. In Rousseau, look, the last chapter of the civil contract is about the civil religion, or even later the French minister of the separation between church and state, his name was Émile Combes, was naturally an anti-Catholic, but he did have, that is not well known, but it's true. He wanted to create a republican religion. And I was, not to say naturally, it did not succeed. So that means this brief, and I say nothing about all the period of the king in Europe, etc., because precisely the king of Europe, the kingdom, and the sovereignty of the kingdom has been nothing else than the progressive and slow secularization of the power going when it seems to be possible in the way to make a new empire like Rome. That's Napoleon, that's Bismarck, and the third, you know his name. So I prefer not to pronounce it. And when it was not the phantasm of a return to the empire, it has been the progressive integration of the state with the economy and technology. You know. For example, in England, all the revolution of the enclosure, etc., and all what happened in England with that was the starting point from which England became the so big nation overseas and the big colonizing nation. And the reign of Louis XIV in France is exactly the starting moment of the government of the bourgeoisie, that is, of the kind of technocracy and of economicocracy, if you want. It is the time of the first kind of economical theory, etc., etc. So all this story was going in a certain way direct to the modern story of democracy. And finally, within this whole process, what has been the orientation? Precisely the orientation which naturally was still there, but in a very strange way. The orientation was the orientation of a nation or a land or a country with its king. So, la France, les Français, the destiny of France, precisely all this nationalistic movement, which occupied such energy and etc. in the 19th century, is an orientation, I would say, without orient. Or the orient as the identity finished, you know where? In the camps. And besides of that, I could add that the history of anti-Semitism is a history precisely of the need, of the drive to condemn an identity which was precisely not a political identity. And with the Judeo-Christianism. And so apart of the fact that Christianism was the first responsible for anti-Semitism. But inside Christianity, the say, one of the aspects of the Jewish heritage, which is more than an heritage, the Jewish matter. I will not say the Jewish blood. So the Jewish spirit, it's much better. So, in Christianity was precisely the separation between, as you know, between Caesar and God. As Christ says that. And precisely, I think that in the Christian anti-Semitism, it has been very, very strongly a kind of revenge against the shame that the Christian felt, saying that the Jew was still in the separation of religion and state, while the Christian, which should have been like the Jews, the Christians that started, for example, to make the Crusade, and anti-Semitism goes enormous at the time of the Crusade. And if Luther is one of the most stable anti-Semite in the history, this is not a matter of personality of Luther, as it is because at the core of the reform, there is a big change between religion and state. It is with the reform that we go to the eius regio cuius religio. So religion becoming not only linked to the state, but almost the same as the state. And as you know, something similar in a way happened in the old Russia. Well, in the old Russia and in the new Russia as well. Well, why I say that all just that to show that Europa and Western has been traversed by a double trend of one way to build something absolutely new, the empire in a way, yes. And the international empire of what? Of man producing himself, which is a formula of Marx. So, and precisely, maybe man producing himself cannot say more than what we do when we make children. Yes, human being produce human being, but precisely it doesn't make a politics. It doesn't make a collectivity. Or on the other side, the other trend has been to slowly forget politics. As well in the Greek meaning as in the Roman meaning, or partly as well as in the sacred and royal meaning. And at the end, no surprise if there is no longer politics. Well, I think I stop here. Really, I have nothing more to say. But we can discuss.